Welcome back, America. Just before the commercial break, we had a great conversation about those declassified documents that somehow the Justice Department has foiled getting to the American public. The man who fought relentlessly to get these documents to the American public is joining us now. He's the former North Carolina congressman, former chief of staff to President Donald Trump. He is Mark Meadows. Mark, good to have you on the show.
It's great to be with you, John. And you talk about me fighting. Yeah, indeed I did. But President Trump was the one that continued to make sure that transparency with the American people on this issue was what it was all about.
Yeah, it's so important. And you did everything to get these documents. You got them declassified, all the markings are on them, they're ready to go. The last second the Justice Department comes and says, oh, we thought of another issue. Tell us what happens on the morning of the 20th.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is there was some concerns about privacy, even though, I think it's very clear that some of the privacy issues that they were raising was really not an issue. Yeah. But out of the abundance of caution, we wanted to make sure that we didn't harm anyone, and so we gave them those declassified documents. I want to stress they were declassified documents to do a final redaction for some of that personal information, with the instruction that they were to go ahead and disseminate those. We expected fully that they would do that within, at the most a few days. But here we are, a few years later.
Surprising that a lawful order from a sitting president doesn't get followed by the Justice Department.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest concern for a lot of people is they want to get to the bottom of it, John. And you've done a lot of reporting on this, and there's only been a few people that very early on said that this whole Russian narrative, that something didn't add up. Yeah. And indeed it didn't add up. And we found that not only were some of the allegations made by some of the Democrats false, but they were kind of guilty of what they were accusing Donald Trump of.
Exactly.
And so
projecting.
And so I think that this, the work that you're doing and some of the others, Mr. Fenton, is really critical, because it's something that the American people just say, listen, are we ever going to get to the bottom of it? And you and I know the truth. Donald Trump knows the truth. Yeah. Others around him know the truth. It's time that the American people know the truth.
Amen to that. Absolutely.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm coming in to join the party, so thank you for letting me rain on your parade. I wanna ask you, Congressman, because there's a very concerning element about this. During your time as Chief of Staff, did this happen often? In this case, obviously, it was the DOJ, but an instance where you would have a government entity defy the president, and furthermore, would this happen under a different president?
Well, the swamp is pretty deep, and you coming in, I don't know that you're raining on our parade as much as you are adding a little bit of clarity. Hopefully the clouds are rolling back and we'll get some clarity on it. But when we look at this, this particular president was all about draining the swamp. And when he was running, that was more of a campaign slogan. When he got there, he realized that not only was the swamp very deep, but they would fight back. And oftentimes he said, I want to do this and get this out to the American people, not just declassification in terms of issues that affected him or his campaign personally, but issues that affect the American people. And what would happen is he would have a directive, and then we would see as people were leaving the Oval Office, they were nodding compliance in the Oval Office, and the minute they go out, they say, well, we're not going to do that, or we're going to find all the reasons not to do it. So I found it very often while I served as Chief of Staff, but also found it as a member of Congress, that many times we would go in and the president was all in on a transparency issue, only to find that many, whether they be at a particular agency or the Pentagon, they started pushing back.
Absolutely stunning. You more than anyone, I think you and Devin Nunes did more than anyone, maybe Jim Jordan, to really squeeze this story out of the Justice Department and the FBI, because at the beginning, everyone was convinced that the president was some sort of stooge of Russia. Then we find out there was zero evidence of it, and it was all contrived. When you take a look at the documents that you helped get declassified, that the American public are going to get soon, we're going to get these documents. What is the big story you want the public to take away from? What did you learn from them when you went through
Well, I
that?
think probably the biggest thing is the whole narrative that many of the Democrats on Capitol Hill built their foundation on. If they were looking at the same documents, and honestly, some of our nemesis, whether it be Adam Schiff or others, they had access to some of these. So there's no way that they could go on Sunday show after Sunday show after Sunday show and say what they did, looking at the very documents that I've had the opportunity to review. And so the president knew that. We knew that. You know, it was painstakingly, and you mentioned Congressman Devin Nunes. I mean, he and Jim Jordan did real yeoman's work in trying to get to the bottom. Oftentimes when nobody out there really believed them, and now all of a sudden many in the media are starting to realize that there was not a real nexus for the Democrats' narrative, and there was one for Donald Trump's narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think what's so important about this story in particular is that it illustrates a larger problem. Congressman, what you were talking about as far as when President Trump came in and he would declass things because he felt like it was important to the American people, and you could almost witness people in Washington, D.C., well, this is not how it's done. We don't do things this way in this town. What is it going to take for it to change how things get done?
Well, I can tell you it's going to take someone with real courage, because, you know, Donald Trump was willing to do that and fight the fight. I can tell you a lot of people are not willing to do that. A lot of people that are willing to raise their right hand and run for the office, the highest office in the land, are more intent on just looking the other way and saying, well, that's the way the system is. And so it's really a revamp of making sure that our intelligence community really is looking at real intelligence and not using any of that for domestic purposes, and not politicizing it. You know, and it's real easy to paint a very broad brush, and I don't want to do that here today, to paint a broad brush to say that all the folks in the intelligence agencies are doing this. I think it's some that's actually used it for the wrong purpose, and they've allowed it to be perverted. And in that, we've got to get to the bottom of it. And so whatever three-letter agency you want to apply to that, you know, it's just a good government kind of thing. But I don't know that there's too many that have the intestinal fortitude to stand up to the swamp. That's why it's gotten to be as bad as it is.
Yeah, no, and it takes a high cost, as everybody who's ever stood up to them finds out. I mean, they can do a lot of things to poke holes in your back while you're just trying to get the Americans' truth. I want to turn to the issue of the size of government, because you've been a champion of a smaller government, less regulation, less taxes. Most Americans finally got to see what a big socialist government looks like in the first couple of years of Joe Biden. It seems like they're having buyer's remorse in it. Do the Republicans, because you work so closely with them, what you're doing at CPI is so essential, do the Republicans have a mandate coming out of this election, and do they have a plan to start to shrink the size of government, maybe make some of those recalcitrant bureaucrats, put them on the jobless unemployment line?
You know, really, when it comes to shrinking the size of government, it gets, as you know, John, it's really hard with the Civil Service Act that is in place. It's, you know, over 4 decades old, and allowing federal employees to use their talents in other places is not something that comes very easily. I will say this, that do they have a mandate, to answer your question? The answer is yes. Do they see that when you have government spending, it affects your pocketbook at home? Without a doubt. They're paying for it at the pumps. They're paying for it in the price of food. They're paying for it in almost anything that they're purchasing right now. What is that? Well, that's growing the size of government. So the plan, honestly, is probably just slowing down the growth of government so that it matches whatever our inflation rate would be, or increase in population. But really, government has increased exponentially when you compare it to inflation rates and our population growth. It's just one new agency after another. And the American people have a hard time figuring out what most of these folks do, and they really don't get it.
No, they don't. Well, this election is going to be about big government, I'm sure. Sir, thank you so much. We're going to complete the job you did. We're going to get those documents out. Thank you for starting that process. We'll be right back after this.